Hello dear students and welcome to our series on geography. In the previous class, we learnt about economic and demographic patterns in Asia. Today we shall learn about traditional vocations and ethnic races in Asia. We will thus touch upon ethnic races and their regional origins, agro-meteorological roots of traditional vocations, specialization of skills for livelihood in Bronze Age and Stone Age, traditional agro-meteorological livelihoods, and Asia as a multicultural ethnic pot. Ethnic races and their regional origins. The terms ethnicity and ethnic group are derived from the Greek word ethnos, which is normally translated to nation. The terms refer currently to people thought to have common ancestry who share a distinctive culture. The term ethnic and related forms from the 14th century through the middle of the 19th century were used in English in the meaning of pagan, heathen, as ethnikos was used as the 70th translation of Hebrew goyim in the nations non-Hebrews, non-Jews. The modern meaning emerged in the middle 19th century and expresses the notion of a people or a nation. The term ethnicity is of 20th century coinage, attested from the 1950s. The term nationality, depending on context, may either be used synonymously with ethnicity or synonymously with citizenship in a sovereign state. Writing about the usage of the term ethnic in the ordinary language of the United Kingdom and the United States, Wallman notes that, quote, "The term ethnic popularly connotes race in Britain, only less precisely and with a lighter value load. In North America, by contrast, race most commonly means color, and ethnics are the descendants of relatively recent immigrants from non-English speaking countries. Ethnic is not a noun in Britain. In effect, there are no ethnics. There are only ethnic relations." Unquote. Thus, in today's everyday language, the words ethnic and ethnicity still have a ring of exotic peoples, minority issues, and race relations. Within the social sciences, however, the usage has become more generalized to all human groups that explicitly regard themselves and are regarded by others as culturally distinctive. Among the first to bring the term ethnic group into social studies was the German sociologist Max Weber, who defined it as, quote, "Those human groups that entertain a subjective belief in their common descent because of similarities of physical type or of customs or both, or because of memories of colonization and migration. This belief must be important for group formation. Furthermore, it does not matter whether an objective blood relationship exists." Unquote. Whether ethnicity qualifies as a cultural universal is to some extent dependent on the exact definition used. According to Challenges of Measuring an Ethnic World, Science, Politics and Reality, ethnicity is a fundamental factor in human life. It is a phenomenon inherent in human experience. Many social scientists, such as anthropologists Frederick Barth and Eric Wolf, do not consider ethnic identity to be universal. They regard ethnicity as a product of specific kinds of intergroup interactions rather than an essential quality inherent to human groups. Human races, like all natural populations, change continually. Several processes play an important part in the formation and change of races. These include natural selection, mutations, genetic drift, race mixtures, and social factors, as well as technological and medical advances which also produce racial changes. Agro-meteorological roots of traditional vocations. Since we now have an idea of the agro-meteorological conditions and agroclimatic environment in different regions of Asia, we should be able to derive and study the evolution of livelihood of the populace in these regions. Let us start at the very beginning. The modern usage of ethnic group reflects the grand mixture of external groups, immigrants and indigenous peoples in the industrial societies. Ethnic thus came to stand in opposition to national, to refer to people with distinct cultural identities. The intermingling of ethnic races due to industrial and economic factors has seriously challenged the notions of sociological integration through media such as language, food and clothing. The concept of ethnic minorities, perpetuated by historical wars, economic divides, linguistic and cultural identities, has on the one hand created subcultures and a rich pluralism, and on the other, ethnic identities have led to wars, conflicts, socio-economic disparities and even political subjugation to the mainstream. Those races in Asia which can be traced to the Negrito group are the ones who have migrated from Africa after the continents moved post-Pangaea. These Negrito races have their descendants today in the ethnic tribes of the Andaman Nicobar Islands and a few other tribes on mainland India and in Papua New Guinea and far eastern Indonesia. These tribes have managed to retain their traditional lifestyles in synchronicity to their ancient environs. They are very familiar with the challenges of survival in dense, thick, wet evergreen rainforests, first in Africa and then, as the continents moved, in South and Southeast Asia. Thus, they have mastered the techniques of taming some harsh conditions and coping with them. They also know the wherewithal of harvesting Mother Nature's bounty in deference to her rules. Asia's islanders developed harpoon fishing as an efficient technique may be, but they also evolved a fascinating repertoire of recipes of locally available food resources. Yams that are bountiful in the tropical Paradise Islands are cooked and sauteed in coconut milk, garnished with medicinal herbs and seasoned with even more fragrant spices. The result is an aromatic assault that was irresistibly seductive to Occidental traders and naval officers coming to establish the foundations of their future empires. Simple, bland food made with locally available resources remains to this day the best example of sustainable living and livelihoods. The islanders are familiar with the change in the sea currents and spawning seasons for fish stock. Thus, they willingly defer to the suzerainty of Mother Nature. They know the antidote to indigestions and other food-induced disorders that may occur due to imbalance in nutrition intake. Coastal communities and those living near riverbanks are influenced by the contours and horizons where they live. Consequently, they carve out livelihoods such as boat making, oar making, fishing net weaving, making of harpoons with deer antlers, pottery and ceramics, among others. Basket making, handicrafts, carpet weaving, best practices in shepherding, milking techniques, among others, are all traced to agro-meteorological wisdom of ethnic groups. Grazing and shepherding have indeed become the traditional vocations of many an ethnic tribe in the Indian subcontinent. Other tribes are known for manufacture of tools and implements like grinding stones, mortar and pestle, pottery, among others. Pottery eventually evolved into making ceramic in China. Specialization of skills for livelihood in the Bronze Age and Stone Age. Groups of people or communities living in certain areas made the best use of locally available resources to help them carry on their way of life as smoothly as possible. Thus, they started making agricultural implements like hoe, plow, axe, harpoons, agricultural scissors, among others. Some others specialized in pottery making, brick making, basket making, others in fishing nets, oars and boats, or hooks, lines and sinkers, or cans, harnesses, horseshoes, among other things, as the case may be. Accessories included anything and everything that aided people in their pursuit of livelihood. These included fashion accessories like braided clips for women, belts for men, headgear for both men and women, implements like plant, scissors, hoe, plow, etc. Other hunter-gatherer communities developed equipment used for hunting. Gatherers started evolving about how best to gather nature's produce with minimal risk. Apart from implements and equipment, the communities also evolved vocation-friendly gear like wide-rimmed straw hats, garments draped in a particularly convenient way, cans, containers made with specific metals and minerals available in their vicinity, and so on. Thus came to be known specific eras like the Bronze Age, Iron Age, Copper Age, etc. The stark juxtaposition of different types of environment provided one local solution. By transferring wild cereals to nearby lowland locations where there were rich soils and abundant water, they could be grown artificially with minimum disruption to the way of life of these groups. But by making this change, early farmers unconsciously began a process of increasing commitment to particular plots of land, foregoing the mobility which came from ranging widely over the landscape to hunt or collect whatever foods were available on a seasonal basis. This process had important consequences, social as well as economic. People came together in larger communities than ever before and on a more permanent basis. Indeed, the areas of prime agricultural land which could be cultivated by simple techniques were so valuable that the sites which were occupied in this move often remained centers of settlement for many years to come. This new form of society had to be regulated by social institutions which were often based on an extension of relationships within the family. Religion too was important in maintaining the bonds of common belief and action within an enlarged community. Since individual people or families had little opportunity for gaining power and there were few divisions of rank or status to provide the basis of a social hierarchy. There were also innovations in technology. Along with permanent settlement came architecture and the building of houses with their fireplaces and ovens from bricks made out of local mud. Experience of the effects of fire on dried clay resulted in the invention of pottery, a suitable set of containers for a settled lifestyle and useful in cooking the cereals which now formed an important component of diet. Soon, these craft skills would be transferred to other materials. With the development of carpentry and the exploration of mineral pigments and their alteration by fire, the new technology provided the basis for discoveries in metallurgy. The provisions of water supplies led to the development of irrigation technology. The existence of domestic animals allowed animal power to be applied to dragging loads and so gave rise to the technologies of the plow and the wheel. In the book Chronicle of the World, a chapter called Civilization in a Grain of Wheat makes fascinating research. Here we get to understand that, quote, agriculture was not invented in a single place to then spread around the globe. Many areas contributed to the stock of domesticated plants and animals, and agriculture can be said to have been invented independently in half a dozen areas. In each one, particularly productive species were taken out of their natural habitats and raised in conditions which were to some extent artificial. Meanwhile, woman was making the greatest economic discovery of all, the bounty of the soil. While man hunted, she grubbed about the tent or hut for whatever edible things lay ready to her hand on the ground. In Australia, it was understood that during the absence of the male on the chase, the wife would dig out for roots, pluck fruits and nuts from the trees, collect honey, mushrooms, seeds and grains. Even today, in certain tribes of Australia, the grains that grow spontaneously out of the earth are harvested without any attempt to separate and sow the seed. The Indians of the Sacramento River Valley never advanced beyond this stage. We shall never discover when men first noted the function of the seed and turned collecting into sowing. Such beginnings are the mysteries of human history about which we may believe and guess but never really know. Then someone invented the wheel. The first step for the Industrial Revolution was taken. Gradually, these communities learned how best to make these implements with as little effort as possible. These secrets then became best practices or traditional knowledge handed over from generation to generation through practice and emulation. Since communities came to be identified by the vocation they excelled at, the communities came to be identified as castes based on their vocations. That was the genesis of the caste system. It's a sociological reality that has plagued every society in every region of the world. The sociological corruption complemented the value attached to the higher or the lower status. Communities whose livelihood revolved around physical labor or use of limbs and equipment came to be nomenclatured as menial vocations, and those that used the human intelligence to evolve and advance more came to be identified as elitist castes. Post-industrial revolution, these caste distinctions based on vocations came to be classified as blue-collar jobs for the menial castes and white-collar jobs for the intelligentsia. Traditional agro-meteorological livelihoods. Communities in local neighborhoods or settlements optimally utilized the locally available resources and specialized in their traditional art or skill. Livelihood-based identification of communities were thus regionalized, leading to ethnic division of society on caste lines, and caste came to epitomize classes too. People living near marshy areas with clayey soil specialized in the art of making bricks and pottery. People living in coastal areas were at once very prosperous because of access to international trade of their wares and produce. Thus, trading communities were often found in coastal areas. Coastal communities also specialized in evolving fascinating agricultural byproducts like traditional food recipes, secondary use of all the horticulture and agriculture crops. They mastered reading and understanding weather vagaries, evolving traditional wisdom about weather-related cataclysms, and understanding, appreciating, and deferring to Mother Nature's suzerainty. 3 meals a day are a highly advanced institution. Savages gorge themselves or fast, to quote from the classic book, The Story of Civilization, An Introduction to Oriental Heritage by Will Durant. The wilder tribes among the American Indians considered it weak-kneed and unseemly to preserve food for the next day. The natives of Australia are incapable of any labor whose reward is not immediate. Every Hottentot is a gentleman of leisure, and with Bushmen of Africa, it is always either a feast or a famine. There is a mute wisdom in this improvidence, as in many savage ways. The moment man begins to take thought of morrow, he passes out of the Garden of Eden into the vale of anxiety. The pale cast of worry settles down upon him, greed is sharpened, property begins, and the good cheer of the thoughtless native disappears. The African American made this transition only in the last 2 centuries. One Peary is said to have asked an Eskimo guide as to what he was thinking. The crisp answer was potent for the civilized man. "I do not have to think," was the answer. "I have plenty of meat." Not to think unless we have to, there is much to be said for this as a summation of wisdom, says Durant in the book. The Tahitians, for example, put into water an intoxicating mixture prepared from the hutio nut or the hora plant. The fish, drunk with it, float leisurely on the surface and they make easy catch. Australian natives, swimming underwater while breathing through a reed, pulled ducks beneath the surface by the legs and gently held them there till they were pacified. The Tarahumaras caught birds by stringing kernels on tough fibers half buried under the ground. The birds ate the kernels and the Tarahumaras the birds. Hunting and fishing were not stages of economic development. They were modes of activity to survive into the highest forms of civilized society. Once the center of life, they are still its hidden foundations. Behind our literature and philosophy, our ritual and art, stand the stout killers of Packingtown. We do our hunting by proxy, not having the stomach for honest killing in the fields. But our memories of the chase linger in our joyful pursuit of anything weak or fugitive, and in the games of our children, even in the word game. In the last analysis, civilization is based upon the food supply. The cathedral and the capitol, the museum and the concert chamber, the library and the university are but the facade. In the rear is the shambles. To live by hunting was not original. If man had confined himself to that, he would have been just another carnivore. He began to be human when, out of the uncertain hunt, he developed the greater security and continuity of pastoral life. For this involved advantages of high importance: the domestication of animals, the breeding of cattle, and the use of milk. We do not know when or how domestication began, perhaps when the helpless young of slain beasts were spared and brought to the camp as playthings for children. The animal continued to be eaten, but not so soon. It acted as a beast of burden, but it was accepted almost democratically into the society of man. It became his comrade and formed with him a community of labor and residence. The miracle of reproduction was brought under control, and 2 captives were multiplied into a herd. Animal milk released women from prolonged nursing, lowered infantile mortality, and provided a new and dependable food. Population increased, life became more stable and orderly, and the mastery of the timid parvenu, man, became more secure on earth. Farming usually began with the cultivation of plants, often the large-seeded grasses of the cereal family, though also root crops in the tropics. Pulses such as lentils, beans, and peas provided a rich complement to these supplies of carbohydrates. By moving these productive species to habitats where they would not only normally grow, their yield could be increased and made more dependable. Other aspects of the subsistence economy then had to be adjusted to fit this new dependence on cultivation. Animals had to be kept near at hand, and thus species which could be herded and tamed were selected for their compatibility with cultivation. In this way, a complementary package of different plant and animal species was put together into a viable farming economy. This demanded both organization and exchange of seeds, tubers, and young animals between different communities. These processes happened within a similar time scale or in contemporary eras in the Near East, the Far East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Americas. In Palestine, the process was underway by 7000 BC, in the Americas by 6000 BC, and in Africa by 4000 BC. In comparison with the speed of earlier developments in human culture during the Ice Ages, this was amazing parallelism in the evolution of Homo sapiens. Finally, nature taught man the art of provision, the virtue of prudence, and the concept of time. Watching woodpeckers storing acorns in the trees and the bees storing honey in the nests, man conceived, perhaps after millennia of improvident savagery, the notion of laying up food for the future. He found ways of preserving meat by smoking it, salting it, freezing it. Better still, he built granaries secure from rain and damp, vermin and thieves, and gathered food into them for leaner months of the year. Slowly, it became apparent that agriculture could provide a better and steadier food supply than hunting. With that realization, man took one of the 3 steps that led him from the state of bestiality to civility. Speech, agriculture, and writing implicitly are the 3 trademarks of civilization, as Will Durant says in the book, The History of Civilization, an Introduction to Oriental Heritage. Asia as a multicultural ethnic pot. Definitely influenced by agroclimatic conditions and evolution of man from the prehistoric times, different ethnic races evolved and settled into traditional lifestyles, largely influenced again by agrometeorological factors. Asia is home to all 3 kinds of racial types, a theory that has now been abandoned in anthropology. These include the classic Mongoloid, Negroid, and Malay. The Caucasian races are a latter-day classification and include native peoples of West Asia, Russia, and Japan. The genetic makeup of races may change to meet changes in climate. Dark and light skin colors, for example, are adaptations of climates. The amount of melanin that colors the skin, hair, and eyes differs greatly from one person to another. Large amount of melanin help protect the skin from sunburn and even improve vision in bright sunlight. Therefore, dark skin and dark eyes are helpful adaptations for people who live in hot, sunny climates. But in cloudy climates with long wintry nights, dark skin may interfere with the production of vitamin D, ingredients that make up the genetic factors of human beings. Dark and light skin colors, for example, are adaptations of climates. Ethnic races are indeed symptomatic of the agrometeorological evolution in certain biogeographic regions. Asia, with its vast landmass and longitudinal sphere, obviously has an unparalleled ethnic diversity. Russia's ethnic races. Russia alone has more than 40 types of ethnic races in the Siberian Peninsula itself. These include Ainu, Sakha, Tuvans, Altaians, Buryats, Khakas and the Tungus. Far Eastern ethnic races. The ethnic races of the Far Eastern nations include Ryukyuans, Taiwanese Aborigines, Ami, Atayal, Bunun, Kavalan, Paiwan, Puyuma, Rukai, Saisiat, Tao, Thao, Su, Truku and Yakuts. Adivasi is a collective term for many indigenous peoples in India. Indian subcontinent has more than 1,800 types of ethnic races, making it nearly impossible to offer the advantages of democratic governance to them. Andamanese are indigenous peoples of the Andaman Nicobar Islands, which include the Great Andamanese, formerly at least 10 distinct groups living throughout Great Andaman, now confined to a single community on Strait Island, Andaman Islands, Jarawas in South Andaman and Middle Andaman, Onges in Little Andaman, Jangil or Rutland Jarawas, now extinct, formerly of Rutland Island, Andamans, Sentinelese in the North Sentinel Island, Nicobarese in Nicobar Islands, Chompins in Nicobar Islands. Other tribes in India include the Kurubas, Nagas, Soligas, Irulas, Yerava and Malaikudi, Khons, Jongs, Todas, Gaddis, Tawangs, Rabris, Garos, Khasis, among others. Nagas, Khasi, Jaintia are found in northeast India. The South Asian ethnic tribes. Nepal hosts at least 103 different tribes and castes. Kalasha of Chitral are an ancient pre-Muslim ethnic minority in Chitral district in northern Pakistan. The Giravaru people are found in the Maldives. The tribes in Sri Lanka include the Vaniyala Etto and the Vedas. Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia generally includes the mainland region, sometimes known as Indochina, and the Malay archipelago. The following tribes are native to this region: Akha of Thailand, Laos, Myanmar and Chinese minority, Bajau, Borneo and the Sulu archipelago, including Malaysia, Indonesia and Philippines, Dayak of Borneo, Degar of Vietnam, Hmong of Thailand, Myanmar and Laos, Igorot of Cordillera Mountains in Luzon in the Philippines, Karen, one of the hill tribes of Myanmar and Thailand, Lahu, one of the hill tribes of Thailand, Myanmar, Laos and Yunnan in China, the Lisu, one of the hill tribes of Myanmar, Thailand, Arunachal Pradesh in India, Yunnan and Sichuan in China, the Lumad in Mindanao in the Philippines, Mangyan in Mindoro in the Philippines. Negrito includes the Semang of the Malay Peninsula, the Eta of Luzon, the Ati of Panay, the Mani of Thailand and the Andamanese, also called Orang Asli or original people in Malay. Tribes of Palawan, Palawan, Philippines, Penang, Sarawak, Malaysia, Sakai in Malay Peninsula. Southwest Asia. Southwest Asia generally includes the region of Persia or Iran, westwards of Pakistan, the Arabian Peninsula, Middle East, the Levant, Mesopotamia, the Caucasus region and Anatolia. Assyrians. Assyrian-speaking people mostly are found in Mesopotamia. They are also found in Syria, Turkey, Iran and the Caucasus region. The Bahraini people are Arabic-speaking people, inhabitants of the archipelago of Bahrain and the oasis of Qatif. Arabic marsh dwellers or Madan. They are Arabic-speaking group in the Tigris-Euphrates marshlands of southern Iraq and Iranian border. The Negev Bedouin are Arabic-speaking people in the Negev desert of southern Israel. Each of these races enjoy their separate identity based on caste, creed, vocation, that is invariably an agrometeorological evolution, language, clothing, food habits, customs and traditions. Festivities invariably synchronize with the weather and seasonal changes and are an expression or celebration of joy at the change of seasons. A large medley of languages, races and ethnic identities make Asia the boiling pot of ethnic races, according to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister. The linguistic identities and the agrometeorological traditions have evolved in each region, lending a generous diversity to the cultural platitudes of Asians. So, my dear students, with this background, surely you will be able to understand the evolution of political thought and philosophy of the region, geopolitics, the evolution of post-Second World War economy and polity. In the next class hour, we will study climate, the way weather patterns, climate, rainfall patterns affect the growth and sustenance of Asia and her peoples. Geography has shaped Asia's history and brought Asia to its present status in the context of the world. Until then, have a nice time and take good care of yourself. Ciao.